Once in a quiet town surrounded by golden wheat fields, there stood an old clock tower in the center of the marketplace. The tower had watched over the town for more than 100 years. Generations had grown up hearing its steady ticking and the deep chime that rang every hour. Inside the tower lived two large gears that made the entire clock function. One gear was shiny and polished. It was strong, perfectly shaped, and placed right in the center of the mechanism. Every movement of the clock depended on it. It took great pride in its position. The other gear was smaller. Its edges were slightly worn, and one of its teeth had a small chip. Because of that tiny flaw, it sometimes made a faint clicking sound when it turned. The shiny gear often looked down at the smaller one. "If only you were as perfect as I am," it would say proudly. The clock would run even more smoothly. "That little chip of yours makes noise. It is embarrassing." The smaller gear never responded. It simply kept turning, doing its job as best as it could. Day after day, month after month, the shiny gear boasted about its perfection. And slowly, the smaller gear began to feel ashamed. "Maybe I really am a problem," it thought. "Maybe the clock would work better without me." One cold autumn evening, a violent storm struck the town. Fierce winds howled through the streets. Rain poured heavily. Lightning struck the clock tower with a loud crack that echoed through the valley. Inside, the entire mechanism shook violently. When morning came, the townspeople looked up at the clock. It had stopped. For the first time in decades, the tower was silent. No ticking. No chime. The town felt strangely empty without the familiar sound. An old watchmaker named Mr. Alden was called to repair it. He had once been an apprentice in that very tower when he was a young boy. Now his hands trembled slightly with age, but his eyes were still sharp and wise. He climbed the narrow stairs and opened the clock's wooden door. Inside, he examined every gear carefully. The shiny central gear had cracked during the storm. A deep fracture ran across its surface. It could no longer hold the mechanism together. The smaller gear, though worn and chipped, was still intact. Mr. Alden studied the pieces quietly. The shiny gear, though broken, still held on to its pride. "This is unfortunate," it said bitterly. "The storm destroyed me. Now everything will fail." The smaller gear felt a strange mixture of sadness and fear. "Now the clock truly needs a perfect gear," it thought. "I will never be enough." But Mr. Alden surprised them both. Instead of replacing the smaller gear, he carefully adjusted its position. He tightened a few screws and aligned it closer to the center. Then he removed the broken shiny gear. The smaller gear trembled. "Sir," it whispered softly, "I am not perfect. I have a chip. I make noise. I cannot replace something so flawless." Mr. Alden smiled gently as if he could hear its silent thoughts. "No piece in this clock is flawless," he murmured. "Perfection is not about appearance. It is about endurance." He carefully connected the smaller gear into the heart of the mechanism. At first, the movements were slow. The smaller gear turned cautiously, unsure of itself. Tick. 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 The clock began to move again. The sound was slightly different now, softer, warmer, almost comforting. At noon, the bell rang once more across the town. The people cheered in the streets. "The clock is alive again," they said happily. Days passed, and the smaller gear adjusted to its new role. It discovered something surprising. The tiny chip on its tooth, the very thing it had been ashamed of, created just enough flexibility to absorb pressure during heavy winds. When the next storm came, the mechanism bent slightly but did not break. The clock kept ticking. One quiet night, as moonlight filtered through the tower windows, the smaller gear reflected deeply. "All this time," it thought, "I believed my flaw made me weak. But perhaps it made me resilient. Months later, Mr. Alden returned to inspect the clock. He spoke softly while adjusting the weights. "Strength is not about shining the brightest," he said. "It is about continuing to turn, even after being worn down by life." The smaller gear understood now. It no longer compared itself to what it once was or to what others had been. It simply turned with purpose. The townspeople began to notice something too. The clock's new rhythm felt steadier, calmer. Children said it sounded like a heartbeat. Elderly residents said it reminded them of peaceful evenings long ago. The clock tower was no longer admired for its perfection. It was cherished for its persistence. Years later, when Mr. Alden passed away, the town gathered beneath the tower in silence as the bell rang in his honor. The smaller gear turned faithfully inside, carrying forward the rhythm he had restored. And if you had climbed the narrow stairs and listened closely, you would have heard its gentle whisper in every tick. "You are not broken because you have flaws. You are stronger because you survived them." In life, some people shine brightly and seem flawless. Others carry small chips, scars, mistakes, insecurities. But storms do not test how perfect we look. They test how well we endure. Sometimes the very crack, the very chip, the very weakness we hide in shame becomes the reason we can withstand life's hardest winds. So if you feel worn, if you feel chipped, if you feel like you make too much noise compared to others, remember the clock tower. It was not saved by the perfect piece. It was saved by the one that kept turning. Because in the end, life does not require perfection. It requires courage to keep moving. And sometimes, the imperfect gear becomes the heart of the whole story.